Hey guys, welcome to an emotional and epic journey where we'll dive into the story of an anonymous woman in the Middle Ages. A life of harshness, but brimming with resilience and meaning. This tale isn't just a vivid painting of cold, hunger, and injustice. It's also a tribute to the silent souls who shaped the world without ever having their names recorded. Get ready to step into a world where fire is the only hope, and every day is a battle for survival. If you love history-soaked, humanistic stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next ones. Hit that like button if you're excited, and drop a comment below to share your thoughts. I'm dying to hear what you think about this story. All right, let's dive in. Your first breath is a fragile wisp of white vapor, mingling with the freezing air inside a rickety wooden hut. The wind howls through the cracks in the walls, like a ravenous beast eager to swallow you whole from your very first cry. Born a girl in medieval Scandinavia, you've already drawn a one-way ticket to a frosty hell. Your mother, exhausted after a grueling labor, clutches you in trembling arms, but her eyes can't hide the deep-seated worry. Your father, if he's not out chopping firewood in the snow-covered wilderness, is probably muttering curses to Odin because you're not a boy. Not the heir of honor, not the pride of the tiny village nestled among towering pine forests where snow falls thick like a cold white blanket. In this brutal land, being born is a gamble with slim odds of survival. Only about 30 to 50% of newborns make it past their first year before the merciless cold, relentless hunger, or nameless diseases snatch their lives away. Plague, whooping cough, or a sudden fever could turn you into a pile of ash before you even catch the faint scent of wood smoke in the air. Winter drags on for 6 months, with the sun daring to peek out for only a few measly hours, leaving darkness and bone-chilling cold to rule. You lie in a crude cradle made of branches, wrapped in a tattered animal hide, but the cold still seeps through every crevice like an invisible, razor-sharp blade. Your mother tries to warm you with her feeble breath, but she herself shivers from hunger and fatigue. A bowl of watery barley porridge, sometimes mixed with a few crumbs of dried fish, is all your family has on the harshest days. And you, a new mouth to feed, become a burden no one dares name, aloud. Your village hides among endless pine forests, where towering trees stretch toward the sky, their branches interlocking like giant arms blocking out the light. Snow falls relentlessly, blanketing everything in a monochromatic, frigid world where color feels like a distant luxury. Narrow, muddy paths in summer and rock-hard ice in winter connect the low, squat wooden houses with roofs of straw or dry branches. Smoke rises from crude chimneys, blending into the icy air, forming small, drifting clouds. Birdsong is a rare treat. Instead, the wind screams through the trees, and the distant howl of wolves serves as a grim reminder that nature here isn't a friend, but an unforgiving foe. Your family squeezes into a simple wooden house, its walls built from rough-hewn logs, the gaps stuffed with moss and clay to keep out the wind. Inside, a single cramped room centers around a small fire pit for warmth and cooking. Beds are wooden planks covered with worn animal hides, where you and your siblings huddle together to stay warm during long, freezing nights. The acrid smell of smoke from the fire, the damp reek of animal hides, and the bland odor of barley porridge mix into a signature scent of desperate survival. Lucky or not, you survive those perilous early years. But don't dream of a childhood filled with laughter or carefree romping. In medieval Scandinavia, childhood is a luxury, as if Thor himself swung his thunderous hammer to erase it from your fate. By age 3, you're a miniature version of a woman, trained not to dream, but to endure the brutal cold and relentless hardship. You toddle after your mother into the snow-covered forest, your bare feet purple in makeshift straw shoes, picking up scattered twigs beneath thick snow. Sharp pine needles prick your hands, leaving red scratches, but you learn not to cry out, because whining only earns a sharp rebuke from your mother. Quiet. Girls don't get to be weak. Your mother, with hands calloused like tree bark and a face etched with deep lines, is a living model of endurance. She teaches you the first harsh lessons of life. Only strength and perseverance get you through endless winters. By 5, you're kneeling by the small fire in the wooden hut, tiny hands trembling as you try to spark a flame with flint and dry kindling. If the fire dies, the cold sweeps in like a tidal wave, and the whole family could freeze to death in the night. Small burns mark your hands, leaving faint scars, but you grit your teeth and bear it, because mistakes aren't allowed where winter is the greatest enemy. Your older brother, a few years your senior, is taken by your father to learn hunting and wood chopping, tasks deemed men's work in this society. You watch him with a mix of admiration and envy. Admiration for the freedom he has to run through the snow, envy because you'll never be allowed to dream of such things. While he learns to wield a bow and survive outdoors, you're kept inside, learning to tend the fire, braid ropes, and care for younger siblings. Winter in Scandinavia isn't just weather, it's an invisible force shaping your fate. For 6 months of darkness, you huddle in the frigid wooden hut, where the only light comes from the flickering fire. Your stomach growls louder than the howling wind outside, but you're allowed only a few sips of watery barley porridge, or, if you're lucky, a tiny crumb of dried fish. Your mother teaches you to chew dry tree bark to trick your hunger when the food stores run low, a trick she learned from winters past. You sleep pressed against your siblings on a wooden plank covered with animal hides, the stench of sweat and damp hides making you want to hold your breath. Sometimes, in the endless winter nights, you lie awake, listening to the wind scream through the walls and imagining a different world, a warmer place where the sun never sets, where you could run without being scolded. When the rare, fleeting summer arrives, bringing a sliver of light and fragile warmth, you still don't get the freedom the village boys enjoy. You follow your mother to the river, where icy water rushes like liquid stone, to learn how to wash the family's coarse woolen clothes. Your hands crack and bleed from the cold water, but you bite your lip to keep from complaining, because your mother taught you. Girls must endure pain. You scrub the fabric clean with stones, the cold water soaking through your skin, making you shiver uncontrollably, but you don't dare complain. Complaining is weakness, and in this place, weakness is death. You stand by the ice-rimmed river, watching the water flow and wondering if life will ever change. You have no right to dream. Questions like, what do I want to be when I grow up? Or who will I become? Don't exist. Your only goal is survival, surviving this winter, then the next, and on forever. In your tiny village of squat wooden houses and smoky chimneys, you quickly learn you're a burden. Your father needs sons to chop wood, hunt deer, and carry on the family line. Your mother needs sons to bring hope to the family. You, a girl, are just another mouth eating up the scarce firewood and meager porridge. Neighbors whisper as you pass by, "Another girl, poor family." You hear them, but don't dare cry, because tears are a luxury you can't afford. Tears would freeze on your cheeks before they could fall, and that would only make things worse. The village church, a cold gray stone building looming in the snowy fields, is where you're taught about sin from a young age. The priest, with a voice as dry as the wind whistling through the forest, thunders that Eve caused humanity's fall, and you, a 5-year-old girl, carry that sin from birth. You learn to bow your head before him, not out of reverence for God, but out of fear of your father's whip, the villagers' judgmental stares, and the whispers that you're wayward and would shame your family. You're taught to be obedient, compliant, and silent. Girls don't argue, your mother says, her voice weary as if she's repeated it her whole life. You nod obediently, but inside you wonder, why can your brother romp in the snow without scolding while you cannot? Each day is a lesson in survival. You learn to collect eggs from the henhouse without breaking them, though your frozen hands tremble. You learn to braid hemp ropes, the fibers piercing your skin until it stings, because it's how your family earns a few coins to trade for salt, a commodity as precious as gold in winter. You learn to watch the falling snow and guess if a storm is coming, because gathering firewood at the wrong time could trap you in the forest forever. Your mother teaches you these skills, but she never smiles. Her eyes carry an unspoken apology, sorry for bringing you into a world where the cold doesn't just bite your flesh. It devours every shred of hope. You have a childhood friend named Ingrid, the daughter of a neighboring family a few houses away. You play together, though play here means collecting dry twigs in the forest or helping each other wash clothes by the river. Ingrid has golden hair that shines like the rare summer sun, and eyes as clear as the sky on snowless days. But even she, so young, carries the weary look of an adult. Once, while picking plump red berries in the forest, Ingrid tells you her dream: to become a warrior woman, like those in the old tales her grandmother told. You laugh, but it's a hollow laugh, because deep down you know that dream is as unreachable as sunlight in January. "We're girls, Ingrid," you say softly but firmly. "We learn to survive, not to fight." Ingrid nods, but her blue eyes still flicker with a tiny spark of hope, a spark you don't dare believe you could have. You grow up in the cold wooden hut, where the wind howls through the walls like a death lullaby, haunting and relentless. Surviving those early years doesn't earn you a better life. Here, education is a luxury, like sunlight in the endless winter. You don't learn to read, don't touch a quill, and don't know of a world beyond your snow-covered village. Your school is the flickering fire pit, where your mother teaches you to spark a flame with flint, braid hemp ropes, and cook barley porridge so thin it's barely more than dishwater. You learn to bow to your father, the priest, and every man in the village, because silence is the first and most important lesson for a girl like you. The literacy rate for women here is a round, perfect 0, much like your empty stomach on the coldest winter days. While your brother, if lucky, might learn a few Latin letters from the priest to become a village scribe, you're trapped in an endless cycle of grueling manual labor. You don't learn math to know how much your father is cheated when selling dried fish at the market. You don't learn history to know which battles King Harold fought in the past. All you're taught is survival. And here, survival means working until your hands bleed and staying silent to avoid your father's whip or your mother's harsh scolding. Your mother, with hands rough as rotted wood and weary eyes, teaches you to braid ropes for fishing nets, not so you can dream of being a free fisherman, but to prepare you for the only role this society allows: wife, mother, and servant in another smoky, cold wooden hut. But you're not entirely ignorant, though the world around you wants you to believe you are. On long winter nights, when the wind howls like starving wolves in the pine forest, your mother sits by the fire, whispering enchanting Norse myths. That's the only school you get. You listen to tales of Odin, the All-Father who hung himself on Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 days and nights to gain infinite wisdom, a dream you don't dare entertain for a moment. You hear of Freya, the beautiful and fierce goddess of love, beauty, and war. But your mother stresses that Freya is a goddess, and you're just an ordinary girl. Don't dream too far. Stories of Thor, the thunder god, smashing enemies with his hammer Mjolnir, or the dragon Nidhogger gnawing at Yggdrasil's roots, ignite your imagination in the cold darkness. But these tales aren't just joy. They're warnings that the world out there is dangerous, and your place is in this wooden hut by the fire, silent and obedient. You sit, small hands clutching your knees for warmth, eyes fixed on the flickering fire as you listen to your mother's stories. The firelight highlights the deep lines on her weathered face, carved by years of hunger and relentless labor. You want to ask, is Freya real, Mother? Can she really fly free in the sky? But you don't dare speak. Asking questions is a sign of curiosity, and for a girl like you, Curiosity is an unforgivable sin. The priest in the village's cold stone church has made that clear. Women are Eve's descendants, always ready to lead men astray. You learn to keep your mouth shut, though in your mind you imagine being Freya, riding a chariot pulled by two giant cats across a starry sky. But then the cold seeps into your bones through the thin animal hides, reminding you that you're no goddess. You're just a girl with cracked hands, learning to braid ropes to avoid your father's lash. Your mother often tells stories on the longest winter nights when the family huddles by the fire, trying to forget the gnawing hunger and piercing cold. She speaks of great gods, legendary heroes, and terrifying monsters from Norse mythology. One story you'll never forget is about Sigurd, the hero who slew the dragon Fafnir. With his sharp sword Gram, Sigurd killed the beast and bathed in its blood to become invincible, but a stray leaf stuck to his back left a fatal weak spot. Your mother ends the tale with a stern warning. No matter how strong you are, everyone has a weakness. You must be careful, for enemies will always seek it out. You don't fully grasp the deeper meaning, but you feel the worry in her voice. She's trying to teach you about survival, about staying vigilant in a world full of danger and injustice. A few women in medieval Scandinavia escaped this cruel fate, but not you. Far away, in stone monasteries hidden among endless pine forests, a handful of nuns learned to read the Bible and copy manuscripts with quill pens under dim candlelight. They know Latin, can write their names on parchment, a privilege as distant as sunlight in January. But the monastery isn't for you, the daughter of a poor farming family. You have only a scratchy woolen dress your mother made, itching like a curse on your skin. You dream of holding a quill, of writing your name in the snow, but that dream fades as quickly as your breath in the icy air. Your mother once said, "Girls don't need to read. Knowing how to start a fire is enough to survive." You learn to start fires, and you learn well. You know how to stack wood so the flames burn long, how to shield the spark from the wind. But every mistake, when the fire dies, when smoke chokes the hut and makes your father cough, you earn a hard slap or a vicious scolding. "Foolish girl," your father roars, his voice echoing in the tiny wooden hut as if you meant to anger him. You bow your head, swallowing tears, because crying only makes things worse. You learn to cook barley porridge, though it's so bland you'd rather eat snow. You learn to braid ropes, though the hemp fibers cut your hands until they bleed. These skills are your education, but they open no doors to freedom. They only lock you tighter into a future you can't choose. Sometimes you overhear your father talking with the village chief about taxes, the upcoming fishing season, or storms that might strike without warning. You try to piece together these scraps of information, like solving a puzzle, missing half its pieces. You're smart, you know it, but no one cares about your mind. To them, your brain is as useless as wet firewood unless it helps keep the fire burning. You want to learn more, to know about the world beyond this tiny village, but when you ask your mother, "What's out there, Mother?" she sighs and says, "Don't think too much, child. Thinking only brings more suffering." You nod obediently, but inside you keep asking, why can your brother ask questions, be curious, while you cannot? Once you overhear a conversation between your father and a merchant from a distant town. The man speaks of great ships crossing seas, of strange lands where snow never falls, where the sun shines year-round. You hide behind the wooden door, heart pounding, imagining a world unlike yours, where women might do more than braid nets and cook porridge. But when your father catches you eavesdropping, he bellows, "Get out of here! This isn't your business!" You run outside, tears freezing on your cheeks in the cold, and vow never to dream again. You're barely 15, or maybe just 12, when your parents push you onto a creaky sled, your entire life packed into a rough cloth sack. Your father, face red from barley ale and the biting cold, claps the shoulder of a man by the longhouse hearth. This man, with a beard like a crow's nest and scars crisscrossing his face from battles no one bothers to recount, is your future husband. You've just been sold for a scrawny cow or a barren patch of land, enough to keep your family alive through the next brutal winter. Marriage? Don't dream of roses or candlelit romance. Here, marriage is a cold transaction, and you're the collateral for your family's survival. The marriage negotiations happen in secret between your father and the Viking's father, with no input from you. One day, your mother pulls you into a corner of the hut, tells you to pack your meager belongings, and announces you'll marry next week. You're stunned, your mind blank, unable to comprehend what's happening. "But I don't want to, Mother," you say, voice trembling with fear and confusion. She looks at you, eyes full of pity, but resolute. "You have no choice, daughter. This is how our family survives. You want to cry, to scream, but tears won't come. You feel only a cold void in your chest, as if your soul has been frozen by the Nordic chill long ago. You stand in the smoky wooden hut, the wind howling through the walls like it wants to tear apart your last shred of hope. Your mother, eyes red but offering no comfort, presses a tattered woolen dress into your hands. You want to ask, why me? Why not my brother, who does nothing but sleep late? But you've known the answer forever. He's the son, the hope of the lineage, the one to carry on the family honor, while you're just property, a coin to trade for firewood and dried fish. You glance at the scarred Viking by the hearth, searching for a hint of warmth in his eyes. But no, all you see is a blank, cold stare, as if you're just an old fishing net bought on the cheap. The journey to your new village is long and frigid, on a sled that creaks and sways over icy paths. You clutch the rough cloth sack, feeling the wind slice through your thin dress. Your old village, poor and reeking of dried fish, was at least familiar. Every corner of the hearth, every muddy path, the rare laughter of children when the sun peeked out. Now what? You're headed to a strange place where no one knows your name, to live with a husband you barely glimpsed in the firelight. You wonder if he'll beat you, if he snores like a wild boar, or if he reeks of barley ale and sweat every night. You press your lips tight to stay calm, but tears roll down your cheeks, freezing before they hit the ground. Your wedding has no cake, no flowers, no joyful songs. It's a rushed ritual in the village longhouse where the stench of barley ale and dried fish chokes the air. You stand in a scratchy woolen dress that chafes your skin, listening to the village chief mumble about alliances between families and community survival. You want to scream, to run from this place, but your feet feel frozen to the cold floor. You glance at your new husband, now your master by village law. He grins, showing yellow gapped teeth, and you realize this isn't a fresh start or a hopeful beginning. It's a sentence, sealed in the smoke of the hearth, where you're a pawn in your family's survival game. After the ceremony, you're led to your husband's wooden hut, another creaky, drafty place, not unlike your old one, just as cold and smoky. You step inside, the chill crawling up your skin through your thin dress, wondering if you can ever call this home. Your husband, the man you must now call husband, says little. He jerks his head toward the hearth, signaling you to start a fire. You obey, hands trembling from cold and fear, and when the flames finally catch, you realize this is your new life, an endless cycle of chores and utter silence. Marriage begins with an invisible slap, the truth that love doesn't exist here, never did, and never will. Your husband doesn't care what you think, how you feel, or what dreams you hold. He needs you to cook watery barley porridge every morning, braid fishing nets every afternoon, and bear his children, preferably sons, to carry on his line. You learn to wake before dawn, stoking the fire in the freezing hut, though your cracked hands bleed from the cold. You learn to stay silent when he's drunk, when he yells about a poor fishing season or not enough firewood. You learn to bow your head when he's angry, because otherwise a real slap will land and no one in the village will defend you. The church, with its dry sermons, calls this the natural order that you were born to submit and endure. You want to laugh when you hear those words, but you only whisper to yourself in the dark. Order? Then why do I feel buried alive under this snow? Village gossip becomes your only solace in these dark days. While braiding nets by the fire with other women, you hear tales of girls married off like you, of fates even harsher than yours. One tells of a young bride beaten until she lost her teeth just for burning a pot of porridge on a cold winter day. Another whispers of a girl who fled the village, only to be caught and tied out in the snow until her body froze solid. These stories make you shudder, but they also make you feel less alone. You're not the only one trapped in this icy bargain. You share your own story, voice trembling, about the day your father put you on the sled, about the fear when you first saw your scarred husband. The other women nod, their eyes saying they understand, that they've lived those moments too. An older woman, Astrid, often speaks of olden days when Nordic women had more power and voice. Before the Christian church came and changed everything, she says, her voice hoarse with age. We had goddesses like Freya, warrior women in legends. Now we just endure. You hang on her every word, silently hoping that one day the world might be fairer to people like you. But you know that hope is as distant as sunlight in winter, and all you can do is keep surviving, keep enduring. You're not always weak or resigned. You find ways to survive, like every other Nordic woman in this village. You'll learn to cook thicker porridge, adding bits of dried fish to keep your husband from yelling at every meal. You hide a small knife in your dress, not to fight him, but to cut ropes faster, to make work smoother and avoid his random beatings. You learn to smile, though it's a bitter, crooked smile, choked by the snowy wind. You look at the other women, sisters, mothers, friends, and see they're playing the same survival game. You have no power, no voice, but you have resilience, something even the Nordic cold can't break. Once you chance upon Ingrid, your childhood friend, at the village's small market. She's married too, and the clear eyes of her youth are now dulled by exhaustion and resignation. We have to survive, don't we? She says, her voice flat, as if she's long accepted her fate. You nod, and you embrace in a rare moment of solidarity, of wordless understanding. We'll survive, you whisper, a promise to yourself, hoping it becomes true, even if it's just a fragile hope in the snowy whiteness. You stand in the creaky wooden hut, your belly heavy as if carrying a frozen boulder, each step a challenge beyond your endurance. Every pregnancy is a gamble with death in a space filled with drafts and choking hearth smoke. No doctors, no medicine, just an old midwife with trembling hands and a weak fire in the hearth. The wind howls through the walls, mocking you, reminding you that childbirth here isn't a romantic tale of blessings and smiles. It's a fight for life, and you have no choice but to join the battle. The wooden hut is a frozen box, the cold creeping through every crack as if to devour you. The fire in the hearth struggles against it, but it's as weak as your hope in these moments. No sterile delivery room, no soft bed, just an old, tattered animal hide spread on the hard, cold floor, and the midwife with gnarled, calloused hands and tired eyes, who's seen too many births to offer sympathy or comfort. You lie on the hide, listening to the winds wail outside, wondering if you'll survive this time. A third of women like you die in childbirth, or days later, when their exhausted bodies can't fight the cold or silent infections spreading within. Your mother taught you a few folk remedies to cope with labor pains. You recall evenings by the fire, her hands peeling dry roots, crushing withered leaves, whispering how to use them to ease the agony. "This plant helps with pain," she said, pointing to a handful of dried mint, but her voice trembled, as if she knew it was a feeble comfort. "You learn to boil mint leaves in hot water to soothe contractions, to use nettle roots to staunch bleeding if the tears are too deep. But herbs aren't magic, not a miracle to save you from death's scythe. Most of the time, you just pray, turning to Freya, goddess of childbirth and love, hoping she hears your call from this tiny corner of the frozen world. You clutch a rough cloth, trying to believe the gods will save you, but deep down, you know it's just you and the cold, no one else. Bearing a son is a grand triumph, a reason for your scarred husband to flash a rare smile on his weathered face. A boy is the family's pride, the heir of honor, the hope to carry the lineage through endless winters. Villagers gather around the hut, raising mugs of homemade barley ale, congratulating you as if you've won a great battle. But a daughter? You see the disappointment plain on your husband's face, as if you've thrown away a fortune in the snowy wind. A girl is another mouth to feed, another burden when the fish stores dwindle and firewood becomes more precious than gold. You look at your newborn, tiny and fragile, wrapped in a tattered cloth, and wonder if she'll survive her first winter, or if she'll grow up only to be married off like you, repeating this cycle of suffering and endurance. Pregnancy is a long, grueling journey through cold and hunger. You must keep working as usual, braiding nets, drying fish, washing rough wool, though your growing belly makes every movement heavy and painful. Your husband doesn't care about your exhaustion. He demands you fulfill your duties like an emotionless machine. Sometimes you feel like nothing more than a beast, existing only to labor and reproduce. But you don't dare complain, don't dare speak up, because that leads to punishment. A slap, a tirade, or worse, his terrifying silence, a sign of a brewing storm of rage. When labor finally begins, you lie on the cold animal hide, sweat mixing with tears streaming down your face. The midwife, with her calloused hands and flat, emotionless voice, instructs you to push, her words more commands than encouragement. You grit your teeth, trying not to scream, because screaming wastes strength, and strength is something you can't afford to lose. The other women in the village, your sisters, surround you, holding your hands tightly, whispering weak encouragements. You can do it. Keep going. But their eyes are filled with worry, as if they're not sure you'll make it. They tell stories to keep you awake, tales of their own childbirths, of times they nearly died in pain. An older woman recounts how she used hot water to ease her daughter-in-law's pain, only for both mother and child to perish. You want to scream, to tell them to stop with these horrific tales, but you lack the strength to speak. Instead, you bite your lip until it bleeds, focusing on the flickering fire in the hearth, hoping its light will guide you through this nightmare. When the child is finally born, its weak cry rises above the howling wind outside. You breathe a sigh of relief, but it's fleeting, because the fight isn't over. The days after birth are another ordeal, perhaps harsher than the labor itself. Your body is exhausted, the wounds from childbirth prone to infection in the relentless cold, and you must fight to stay alive. You wrap the baby in animal hide, holding it close to share your warmth, knowing you too need to stay warm to avoid collapsing. You drink mint leaf water to ease the pain, force yourself to swallow watery porridge despite your churning stomach. Your husband, if kind, might bring extra firewood to warm the hut. If not, he'll growl, scolding you for resting too long, for not preparing his dinner. You look at the tiny, fragile baby in your arms, like a flame about to flicker out, and wonder if you have the strength to raise it through this winter, or if the cold will swallow you both. Caring for a newborn is exhausting, demanding you sacrifice sleep and strength. You stay up all night, nursing with the little milk your depleted body can offer, soothing the baby when it wails in the cold. Sometimes you're so exhausted you want to collapse, to give up, but you can't stop. If you stop, the baby dies, and you can't let that happen. You learn to wrap it tightly in animal hides, place it near the fire for warmth, and whisper prayers to Freya in the dark. You recall your mother's words. You must be strong, because now you're a mother. And you try, though sometimes you feel you can't go on another minute. You wake when the sky is still pitch black, when the sun, if it deigns to rise, is just a faint streak on the horizon. The wooden hut creaks in the bitter wind, and your cracked hands are ready for another day in the endless cycle. Stoking the fire, cooking porridge, braiding nets, tending the cow, mending clothes, and countless nameless tasks. No days off, no full night's sleep, no moment to catch your breath. Housework is a monster that never sleeps, and you're its slave, chained by cold, hunger, and inescapable duty. Think a long workday is tiring? Try living a day here where stopping means death, and you'll understand true exhaustion. Your day begins with the fire, a seemingly simple battle but full of struggle. The wood is often damp from snow, the wind through the walls snuffs out fragile sparks, and you blow on the embers until your eyes sting and your hands shake from cold. When the fire finally catches, you set a pot of barley porridge on it, the bland staple your family eats week after week, with no other choice. The porridge must be thick, not watery, or your husband will roar like a starving beast, and you'll face a tirade, or worse. You stir with a worn wooden spoon, smoke making you cough, wondering if anyone ever dreamed of a life like this. The answer is obviously no, but you have no choice. Then you trudge to the cowshed, where the stench of manure and hay clings to your clothes. You milk the family's scrawny cow, hands numb from cold, praying it doesn't kick over the bucket. Once, you spilled the milk on the frozen ground, and your husband's screams echoed through the village. "Useless!" he bellowed, voice thick with ale and rage. You bowed your head, silent, because arguing only makes things worse. You carry the milk back, straining it through rough cloth to remove dirt, vowing to be more careful because milk is precious. Liquid gold traded for dried fish or a new cloth at the market. In winter, when days are short and darkness blankets nearly everything, you sit mending clothes and braiding nets by the fire. The flickering flames are your only light, illuminating your hands as you stitch torn woolen dresses, needles pricking your calloused fingers. Fishing nets need repair too, because the short spring is coming, and a torn net means no fish to eat or sell. You braid hemp ropes, fingers stiff from cold, while the wind howls outside like starving wolves. In summer, when the sun lingers a bit longer, you dry fish on crude wooden racks, hands slick with fishy stench, swatting flies and praying for no sudden rain. Dried fish is currency, traded at the market for salt, a new knife, or a few sticks of firewood. Once you sold a large bundle of fish and dared to dream of new shoes to keep your feet from freezing. But your husband took the money, spent it on barley ale, and you swallowed your disappointment, knowing protest would earn a merciless slap. Housework isn't just cooking or washing, it's an endless chain of tasks, like a sad song with no finale. You wash clothes in the icy river near the village, the water cutting like knives, turning your hands purple and cracking them until they bleed. You beat the rough wool on rocks to clean it, each motion aching your shoulders, but you don't stop, because dirty clothes mean sickness, and sickness here is death. You carry water from the well, the heavy bucket straining your shoulders, stepping carefully not to spill a drop, because spilled water is wasted sweat. The other women, your sisters, are your only allies in this war, though no one says it aloud. While braiding nets by the fire, you hear their tales of endless days like yours. One tells of nearly being swept away by the river while washing in a sudden storm. Another laughs bitterly, recounting how she mended her husband's shirt all night, only for him to tear it in a drunken rage. You share your story about staying up all night drying fish, only for rain to ruin your work by morning. They nod, their eyes saying they understand, that they're trapped in this cruel cycle too, with no escape. You learn to work smarter to save time and strength, though it's nearly impossible. You prioritize tasks. Start the fire first, cook porridge next, milk the cow, then braid nets at night. You teach your eldest daughter small tasks, like collecting eggs or sweeping with a straw broom, so she learns to help young. Sometimes you feel like a machine, never stopping, never resting. But you can't let go. Stopping means letting the cold and hunger invade the hut, and you can't let your family starve just because you're weak. You stand in a corner of the wooden hut, hands trembling as you stir a pot of barley porridge, careful not to spill a drop. Your husband, the Viking with a tangled beard and bloodshot eyes from ale, glares at you like a hungry wolf stalking prey. One small mistake, porridge too thin, fire burning unevenly, or a glance at the wrong moment can bring his fist down like an unexpected blizzard. In this Nordic land, violence is the law of the wild, ruling every wooden hut, and your prey with nowhere to run. The church, with its dry sermons, calls this the natural order, that your husband has the right to discipline you, even with merciless beatings. You've heard of a woman in the village tied out in the snow for daring to argue with her drunken husband. She survived, but her hands froze black, never to hold a needle or braid a net again. You look at your cracked, scarred hands and wonder if they'll meet the same fate, or worse, if you'll live to see another winter. Violence doesn't just come from inside the hut, from your husband's fists. Every time you step out to gather firewood in the vast pine forest, each step is a heartbeat of fear. War and banditry are the breath of this land, lurking like ghosts in the snow. Men from other villages, or worse, pirates from distant seas, could appear without warning. You've heard of a young girl attacked while fetching water at the stream, dragged into the forest, never to return. Villagers whisper she was killed or taken as a slave to a far-off land. You clutch your bundle of firewood, the small knife hidden in your dress your only comfort, though you know it's useless against a band of men. You hurry through the deep snow, the wind biting your skin, praying to become invisible, blending into the white landscape. The women in the village, your sisters, are the rare light in this darkness of fear and violence. While braiding nets by the fire, smoke stinging your eyes, you hear them whisper of their beatings, of wounds hidden under thick woolen dresses. One tells of being hit for spilling a bucket of milk, her face swollen shut for 3 days. Another recounts a night her husband dragged her to a corner, beating her mercilessly, and no one in the village dared intervene, though they heard her cries. You share your story, voice shaking, about the time you were slapped so hard you fell just for letting the fire die on a cold night, and how you bit your tongue to keep from crying. They nod, eyes full of sympathy, but also helplessness, as if they want to help but can't. Just endure, one whispers, voice low as if afraid someone might hear. If you don't, it'll only get worse. You want to scream, to smash the porridge pot to release your rage, but you nod, because you know they're right. Here, endurance is the only way to survive the day. You learn to tread lightly, speak softly, like a small animal avoiding a trap. You watch your husband, noting signs of his drunkenness or anger, trying to avoid him like dodging an oncoming blizzard. But sometimes there's no escaping his wrath. One evening, he returns from hunting, face red with ale, and because you're slow to set the porridge bowl on the rough wooden table, he grabs your hair, yanking you to the cold floor. You don't scream, don't cry, just lie there, waiting for his anger to subside. Then you stand, wipe the blood from your lip with your sleeve, and stoke the fire as if nothing happened. Because if you stop, if the fire dies, the family starves or freezes, and the cold will devour everything without mercy. Sometimes, in your darkest moments, you dream of escape, leaving this creaky hut, the drunken husband, this wretched village of suffering. But where would you go? Beyond lies the vast pine forest, full of dangers, bandits lurking, and a cold that would kill you before you found shelter. You've heard of a woman who fled, carrying a sliver of hope, only to be caught and tied out in the snow until she froze. You look at your child sleeping on an animal hide, and know you can't leave it with a father like that. So you stay, keep braiding nets, cooking porridge, and enduring, because death is the only other escape. You stand before the village church, a grim, gray stone block amid howling snow, clutching your tattered woolen dress against the bone-chilling cold. The church, meant to lead you to God and salvation, glares at you with contempt and scrutiny. The priest, with a voice as dry as the wind through the forest, declares you a descendant of Eve, a born sinner, carrying the taint of temptation. You, a woman, were made to stumble and drag the world into sin with you. But you've heard of the monastery, where cold stone walls promise escape from your drunken husband and endless beatings. It's freedom, but at a cost steeper than a starving winter. A life of solitude, praying in icy darkness, cut off from everything you've ever known. You step inside the church, the old wooden floor creaking under your tattered straw shoes. Candlelight flickers on stark wall paintings, God and angels staring down as if you're a stain to be scrubbed from the earth. You bow before the altar, not out of reverence, but because if you look up, the priest's icy glare will pierce you like a blade. Women are the devil's temptation, he preaches at every service, his voice echoing in the cold stone hall. You want to laugh at the absurdity, temptation, when your days are spent braiding nets and cooking watery porridge? But you stay silent, lips sealed, because here, silence is your only shield against threatening sermons. The monastery is a distant dream you dare to entertain only on the longest, coldest nights. You hear of nuns learning to read the Bible, copying manuscripts by candlelight, writing their names on precious parchment. You imagine yourself in a gray nun's robe, quill in hand, writing words no one in this village understands. But then you laugh bitterly at yourself because the monastery isn't the paradise you envision. It's a stone prison, trading your husband's fists for solitude and endless prayers in the dark. You have a young daughter, learning to start fires with cracked hands, and you can't leave her to be raised by a drunken husband. You've heard of a woman who left her family for the monastery, only to be remembered as a traitor, a selfish mother who abandoned her children. You look at your daughter, her clear eyes and tiny hands marked by cold, and know the monastery isn't your escape. Despite the church labeling you a sinner, the priest's scornful gaze, this place offers a rare space to breathe, to forget momentarily the endless tasks awaiting you. The Yule festival, when the cold eases slightly and villagers gather in the church to celebrate, is one of the few times you feel you can contribute. You prepare food for the feast, hard barley bread and bits of dried fish, and decorate the church with fresh pine branches you gathered from the forest. You suggest adding candles to a corner, and when their glowing light brightens everyone's faces, a flicker of pride stirs in you. You teach the village children hymns, though your voice is hoarse from smoke and cold. Standing among the crowd in your worn woolen dress for the first time in months, you feel part of something bigger, if only for one fleeting night. You walk the snowy path, head bowed, clutching firewood like a fragile shield. Every stranger's glance, every whispered word at the market makes your heart pound with fear. In this Nordic land, knowing how to boil mint leaves for pain or daring to live alone without a man is enough to brand you a witch. A baseless accusation could see you tied to a stake in the village square, burned alive in the snowy wind while the village watches, no one daring to defend you. Think being gossiped about hurts? Imagine being burned alive for causing a blizzard or ruining the harvest. And you'll know true fear. That fear clings to you like cold seeping into your bones, never leaving. You avoid eye contact with strangers because a wrong glance could be misread as a curse. You once saw an old woman living alone in a small hut at the village's edge, accused of spoiling crops because she knew how to use roots to cure children's fevers. She was dragged to the square, hair wild, screaming her innocence, but no one cared. The crowd needed a scapegoat, and she was the easiest target. You stood among them, heart pounding, not daring to look up as flames consumed her frail body. The acrid smell of burning flesh mixed with the snowy wind, and you vowed to be more careful, to live more discreetly, to become more invisible. You learned to live like a ghost, leaving no trace. When gathering firewood, you take longer, colder paths to avoid prying eyes. You hide a small knife in your dress, not for defense against bandits, but for the faint control it offers amid constant fear. You avoid mentioning herbs, though your mother taught you to use nettle leaves for bleeding or mint for pain. Once, you secretly boiled herbs for a neighbor's sick child, and they recovered, but you lay awake all night, terrified someone saw and would report you to the chief. Witch, you whisper alone in the dark, as if cursing yourself with a spell you can't undo. The church fuels this fear. The priest preaches that witches are the devil's minions, making pacts with darkness to harm the innocent and must be destroyed to save the village. You sit in the back pew, hands clasped until they're white, hearing him list witch signs, knowing herbs, living alone, or simply having a strange look. You want to laugh because, by that logic, the whole village might be witches. But you stay silent, head bowed, singing hymns with a trembling voice, pretending not to hear the wind howling outside, like demons waiting for you to slip. You stand in a dark corner of the hut, hands shaking as you tuck an old cloth into your dress, hiding the red blood spreading from your body. Menstruation arrives like a traitor, unannounced, and here, it's not just an inconvenience, it's a silent curse. No sanitary pads, nothing clean or convenient, just tattered cloth scraps or dry moss from the forest, cold and prone to causing infection if you're not careful. Bathing? The river's water cuts like knives, murky with mud, and one dip leaves you shivering all day. Your body becomes your greatest enemy, and you fight it daily. In shame and fear, no one understands. The wooden hut offers no private corner for these days. You manage in the dark when your husband is drunk and snoring like a boar on the wooden plank, but the rustle of cloth is enough to make you panic. If he wakes and sees, you'll face his contemptuous stare as if you're filthier than the cowshed. You wash the cloths in the icy river, hands numb, the cold water cracking your skin until it bleeds. But no matter how hard you try, the cloth is never truly clean, and the smell of blood lingers like your cruel fate. You sew thicker cloths, each stitch pricking your scarred fingers, hiding them under an animal hide in the corner, like a secret that could kill you if discovered. The other women in the village understand this shame, though no one speaks it aloud. While braiding nets by the fire, you hear their whispered tricks for surviving these days. One teaches you to use dry moss, packed tightly to absorb better, but changed often to avoid infection. Another shares how she sews double-layered cloths, stuffing dried leaves inside to mask the smell. You share your trick, boiling water with dried mint leaves for washing, though water is scarce and firewood more precious than gold in winter. They nod, eyes full of sympathy, but also helplessness, as if they want to help but can't. Will we do this forever? You want to scream, to demand an answer, but you stay silent because you know the answer. Forever, or until the cold or sickness takes you. Disease is a lurking shadow, and your body, weak from hunger and cold, is its easiest target. When your child coughs, face flushed with fever, you sit by the fire, boiling herbs, whispering prayers to Freya to save them. but you know you could be next. Last winter, a plague swept the village, wiping out a neighboring family in days. You cared for them, bringing thin porridge and a few sticks of firewood. But then you fell ill, shivering on an animal hide, thinking you wouldn't survive. You did, but only by luck, and luck here is as rare as sunlight in winter. You sit by the fire, its flickering light illuminating your cracked hands, deftly braiding fishing nets with the skill of a lifetime. The snowy wind howls through the walls, reminding you that surviving another day is a feat worth noting. You have no name in history books, no statue or poem for your deeds. But you are the backbone of this frozen village, keeping it standing through endless winters. You help other women birth children in the dark, share your meager dried fish, teach your daughter to braid nets, and tell myths to keep the village's soul from freezing. Each day is a battle no one records. You start fires with wet wood, hands numb, smoke stinging your eyes to tears. You cook porridge, bland but enough to keep the family from starving overnight. You braid nets, ropes chafing your skin until it burns, because a torn net means no fish to eat or sell. You dry fish in the weak summer sun, hands slick with stench, swatting flies and praying for no sudden rain. These tasks aren't glamorous, don't bring fame, but they're the village's lifeblood, keeping it alive through harsh days. You do them day after day, with a crooked smile and a heart full of unseen scars. The snow market is your small stage, standing in the biting cold, in a tattered woolen dress, trading dried fish for family necessities. A bundle of fish gets a rough cloth to sew your child a dress. Another gets salt, worth more than gold in long winters. You barter with steady eyes and a hoarse voice from smoke, fighting for the smallest advantage. Sometimes you trade fish with another woman who has nothing but a few dry sticks. You don't do it from pity. You do it because without helping each other, the village would crumble like thin ice on the river. You care for orphaned children, those who lost parents to disease or war, with no one left to lean on. You bring them to your hut, though you have little to share. You feed them thin porridge, teach them to braid ropes with tiny hands, and tell them of Freya to ease their cold and loneliness. Once a child called you mother while you stoked the fire, and you turned away, pretending to wipe smoke from your eyes to hide tears. You get no medals or praise for your kindness, but moments like these remind you that you're doing something meaningful, however small. You sit by the fire, its flickering light on your daughter's face, her clear eyes bright as you tell of Thor and his thunderous hammer, Mjolnir. The snowy wind howls, but you keep telling, voice hoarse from smoke and cold. You teach your son courage, your daughter endurance, through Norse myths, sagas unwritten but known by heart in the village. You have no title or reward, but you shape this society through your children, planting seeds of resilience to survive harsh days. The cold wooden hut is your children's only school. No blackboard, no books, just you by the fire, telling of Odin hanging on Yggdrasil for wisdom. You tell your son, hoping he'll grow brave, not like his drunken, violent father. You tell your daughter of Freya, goddess of love and war, to show endurance isn't weakness, that women have their own strength. You look into their clear eyes, their tiny hands cracked from cold, wondering if you're doing enough. Here, raising children isn't just growing them, it's teaching them to survive an unforgiving world. You tell these stories with a bitter tone, knowing the gods aren't really here, don't hear your prayers in the dark. But you tell them because they tie your children to the past, to hope, however faint. You tell of Fafnir the dragon and Sigurd, of greed leading to ruin, hoping your son learns to share dried fish instead of hoarding. You tell of Valkyries, warrior women choosing heroes for Valhalla, so your daughter knows women can be strong, though this society denies it. You're not sure they understand, but their wide, curious eyes are enough to keep you telling, voice trembling from cold and exhaustion. You sit in the hut's dark corner, clutching a small cloth carved with Freya's necklace. goddess of love, beauty, and war. The snowy wind howls, threatening to tear apart the secret you hide. In this land, where the Christian church reigns supreme, you, a woman clinging to old beliefs, are doubly condemned. You braid nets, cook porridge, heal with your mother's herbs, but each act is a step on thin ice where one suspicious glance could brand you a witch, doomed to burn in the square like others before you. The church is the hub of scrutiny and judgment. The priest preaches that the old beliefs are sinful, that Freya, Odin, and other Norse gods are demons in disguise, leading people to ruin. You sit in the back pew, hands clasped tight, hearing him call people like you lost souls, needing fire and holy water for salvation. You want to scream, to ask why your herbs saved a neighbor's child from fever when his prayers and hymns did nothing. But you stay silent, because here, silence is your only shield against the crowd's wrath. You sing hymns with a trembling voice, but in your heart you whisper prayers to Freya, a silent rebellion no one knows. You work discreetly, like a ghost leaving no trace. Braiding nets by the fire, you avoid mentioning your mother's remedies: mint leaves for pain, nettle roots for bleeding, tree bark for fever. You know they can save lives, but they could also kill you if discovered. Once, you secretly boiled herbs for a woman in labor, and she and her child survived. Her grateful eyes terrified you. If someone saw, if someone heard, you'd be accused as a witch, and no plea would save you. You hide the Freya carved cloth under an animal hide, like a secret that could burn you if exposed. The old rituals are your only light in this dark life. On long winter nights, when your husband is drunk and snoring, when the village sleeps under thick snow, you whisper prayers to Freya for strength to endure. You carve small symbols on wood, a sun circle, a Thor's hammer, and hide them under the floor, where no one will find them. You don't do this believing the gods will save you. You do it to hold on to yourself, to keep your soul from being broken by the church. You teach your daughter a few ancient chants, but only in the dark when no one can hear. "Tell no one, child," you whisper, and her curious, fearful eyes tighten your heart, knowing one slip could cost both your lives. You stand in the village's snow market, clutching a bundle of dried fish, your breath forming white clouds in the cutting cold. Your cracked hands reek of fish, but you stand patiently, trading fish for salt, rough cloth, or a few sticks of firewood. You're not a queen like Sigrid Storeda, who refused forced marriages and used cunning to hold her power in Nordic history. You're just a common woman, living in harsh cold, braiding nets, drying fish, caring for orphans, and doing small, unrecognized tasks. But you are the lifeblood of this frozen village, keeping it alive through endless winters, though no one knows your name. Sigrid Storoda's name thunders through oral tales, whispered by the women as they braid nets by the fire. They speak of how she refused marriages forced by kings and lords, not from fear, but to control her own fate. Unlike you, married off at 15 for a scrawny cow, Sigrid stared down powerful men and said no. She didn't just refuse, she turned marriage into her weapon. When a king sought her hand to seal an alliance, she invited him to a lavish feast, only to poison his ale, so the saga says. You hear this from Astrid, your heart pounding, not with fear, but admiration. In a land where women are traded like goods, Sigrid was an unquenchable flame, a symbol of freedom you only dare dream of in fleeting moments. You, a commoner with calloused hands, dare to dream of such freedom in rare moments. You imagine standing tall, saying no to your husband when he growls about thin porridge or a weak fire. But then you look around, the smoky, creaky hut, your daughter learning to start fires with tiny hands, the cold lurking outside like an unsleeping enemy. Sigrid's freedom is a beautiful dream, but as luxurious as a day without work, without hunger or cold. You're no queen, with no army, or power to protect you. But Sigrid's story is a small ember in your heart. While braiding nets with the women, you retell her tale, voice bitter but burning with longing. Sigrid let no one force her, you whisper, and the women nod, their eyes gleaming through the smoky haze, as if they too see a spark of hope in her story. You have no power like Sigrid, no cunning to change your fate, but you create small sparks in this dark life. One frigid winter night, when your husband is drunk and passed out by the hearth, you steal a scrap of dried fish from his stash, wrap it in rough cloth, and bring it to a widowed woman at the village's edge. It's your first act of defiance, small but making your heart race like a drum. You know discovery means a brutal beating, but you do it because Sigrid's story taught you that women can resist, even in the dark, even in acts no one sees. You tell no one, but when the widow grasps your hand, her eyes full of gratitude, you know she understands that she too has wanted to resist like you. You teach your daughter to braid nets, tell her of Freya, not to fuel vain dreams, but to show her women were once worshipped, once held power in a distant age. You carve a tiny ship on a piece of wood, not because you're an artist, but to leave a mark, however small, on time's flow. You care for the village's orphans, share your scarce dried fish, help women birth children in cold nights, not for fame or thanks, but because without you, this village would collapse like a melting ice castle. You've survived endless winters, your husband's beatings, the fear of being called a witch, and the cold that wants to break every hope in your heart. You look at your daughter, now older, learning to braid nets as you did from your mother. You teach her endurance, but also of Freya, of an age when women were sacred. You share fish with those in need, care for orphans, carve small symbols on wood to preserve old ways, though no history book records your name. The stories you tell your children, the nets you braid, the rituals you hide in the dark, they're your mark, small but indelible. Now, as the hearth fire dies and cold seeps through the hut's cracks, you feel a rare peace. Not because life is easier, it never is, but because you know you've done something meaningful. You've kept this village alive through dark days, passed down myths to your children, taught them resilience against hardship. You're no queen like Sigrid Storida, with no power or army to change the world. But you're a small flame, burning quietly in the snow, warming those around you without their knowing. You step outside, brush ash from your hands, and stoke the fire again, because you know stopping means death. And in this frozen village, you are the firekeeper, though no one remembers your name.